Today I'm going to speak with you about the problem and promise of positive emotions in emerging adults at risk for mania. Emerging adulthood is a distinct lifespan period straddling adolescence and young adulthood, juxtaposing a dizzying duality of both resilience and risk. In a time of life perhaps like no other, it affords opportunities as well as challenges for emotional well-being. Today, I want to present a motivated account for why positive emotion difficulties are important to consider as a potential risk factor in emerging adults for mania, and situate this within a broader framework for considering the importance of positive emotion disturbance across psychopathology and its risk. My hope is that we can work together to think of ways to connect as teams across universities, institutions, and importantly across the globe, to collaborate together towards a common goal to confront, understand, and ameliorate emotional challenges during the college years. I'll start by discussing three things today. First, thinking about why emerging adulthood is a period of profound emotional risk. Second, reviewing some findings from our lab as proof of concept for why positive emotion disturbance is important to consider in adults at risk for mood difficulties. And third, by broadening out to think about next steps for collaborative opportunities as a field. We'll start by discussing emerging adulthood and emotional risk. As mentioned, this represents a period of dizzying duality. On the one hand, it's a time of really profound growth and resilience. We see emerging adults experiencing growth in sense of self, identity, and newfound agency, beautiful maturation in cognition and executive control, and on average, general increases in well-being. At the same time, however, there are incredible and unprecedented risks, like none we've seen before. Skyrocketing increases in rates of mood, anxiety, and substance use, which outpace that of general prevalence rates in the community. And not surprisingly, this high prevalence of clinical disorders is associated with impaired academic performance. Some brief descriptives underscore the high prevalence of these serious and costly emotional difficulties. For example, 1 in 3 students report prolonged periods of depression. Up to half of students rate their mental health below average or poor. 1 in 7 students report engaging in abnormally reckless behavior, and this is beyond normative, experimental, or developmentally common risk-taking behaviors we see in these young emerging adults. And finally, perhaps most strikingly, 1 in 4 students report having suicidal thoughts or feelings. Now, this does not just affect the individual student suffering from these emotional difficulties, but has a cascading impact in a common interconnected ecosystem we see in college campus communities. For example, students experiencing symptoms of depression, we see that their student peers have an increased vulnerability in risk for depression in peers and college roommates. Faculty or instructors report strained student-faculty interactions. College counseling centers are confronting more serious cases and a heavier workload, increasing levels of stress and risk for burnout given the inadequate resources to manage this increasing influx. The university community sees lower retention rates among college students, and quite sadly, the scientific community, the very pursuit of knowledge for which many of these students enter college to explore, we see mental health challenges negatively impacting scientific discovery and productivity. Not surprisingly, these facts are garnering widespread and accelerating attention from the public at large. I'll show you 3 examples. First, we see the APA referring to this, the APA being the American Psychological Association, as a mental health crisis, with the World Health Organization reporting 1 in 3 college freshmen worldwide are reporting mental health disorders. Time magazine has underscored the serious need for mental health treatment outpacing the available resources on most college campuses, showing that record numbers of college students are seeking treatment for depression and anxiety, but schools cannot keep up. And here's an example from my local institution, the University of Colorado Boulder, underscoring the growing concern campuses face, noting student mental health is a critical and growing issue. So the timing is critical, and we are poised as a field with an important task to unpack theoretically driven facets of emotional health to better understand adjustment difficulties during this lifespan period. My goal will be to briefly highlight how positive emotion disturbance is one important target. So, the prevailing view that's characterized most of the research on positive emotion is one that seems to couch it predominantly in adaptive terms. And for good reason. Lots of important empirical effects have been established that highlight the adaptive levels or adaptive benefits of moderate levels of positive emotion. For example, we see moderate levels of positive emotion that are contextually appropriate, foster creative thinking, and that's my toddler saying hello, enhances physical immunity to stressors, helps motivate goal pursuit, and fosters and cements social relationships. Yet, we see these empirical tides are changing, with heightened levels of positive emotion disturbance that are profound in magnitude and duration, are associated with illegal and problematic substance abuse, risky sexual behavior, risky financial spending, including pathological gambling, and higher mortality rates related to increased risk-taking and lowered inhibition, and decreased threat detection and vigilance. Not surprisingly, these findings are consistent with recent recognition of positive emotion disturbance in psychopathology involved in the etiology and maintenance of chronic and impairing disorders as both understudied and underappreciated, thus placing it as a top priority at the NIMH RDoc initiative. And this is just one example. We also see in my lab that work has unpacked different puzzles or themes in positive emotion disturbance, which really outline different manifestations of and mechanisms underlying ways that positive emotion can go awry. I'll briefly touch base on a few puzzles today that may be relevant to emerging adults on college campuses. Acknowledging my wonderful research team, these are a few students who have been involved in this work: John, Cindy, Allie, and Zach. I'll start with looking at heightened positive emotion that persists across contexts and is inappropriate or context insensitive. This is a work that we've conceptualized in our work with adults already diagnosed with bipolar disorder as positive emotion persistence. But today I'll highlight why it's relevant to students at risk or emerging adults at risk for mania. In this work, our initial work has explored this in college students at high or low risk for future onset of mania using the well-validated hypomanic personality scale, which is a self-report questionnaire that identifies adults at high or low risk for future onset or episodes of mania. These initial results suggested that those adults who score in the high-risk threshold on this questionnaire, in dark green, compared to young adults, college-age adults, who score in the low-risk threshold, report increasing both increased positive affect, or PA, and increased cardiac vagal tone, which is a psychophysiological index of parasympathetic activity, conceptualized as a physiological marker or correlate of positive mood, across positive, negative, and neutral films. We do not see a significant group by film interaction, really suggesting profound elevations in positive emotion, both at the subjective and physiological level, across film contexts, so across positive, negative, and neutral contexts. This suggests specificity for elevations in positive valence systems in emerging adults at risk for mania. In more recent work, where we've extended this to socially relevant contexts by examining continuous associations between that same measure of mania risk with emotion experience and empathic accuracy in a sample of approximately 121 college-age adults at risk for BD, bipolar disorder, or mania. In this task, participants view a video of a real-world target sharing an intense negative emotional life event, a putative context where empathy is especially critical. At the end of each video, participants report their positive and negative affect. So they watched a video of a young adult sharing a negative life event of their mother dying. This is a real-world target and real-world event. And at the end, they self-report their positive and negative experience. And they also report their positive emotion perception of the target. Our results using linear regression analyses conducted with mania risk predicting both emotion experience and empathic accuracy bias. So the scores represent standard beta coefficients controlling for current depression and mania symptoms as a common confound, indicate that mania risk is a predicted increased positive affect but not negative affect while watching a video of a distressed target, and shows a positive empathic accuracy bias. In other words, they overestimated how much positive affect the target was feeling. And in other words, the mania risk predicts increased positive emotion experience, but also a bias towards overestimating positive emotion in others, even when watching another person in distress. Now, we also looked at specificity. So, is there a restricted range of positive emotions these young adults may experience? And this refers to a concept we've been exploring called emotional diversity, a construct that draws from research in the natural sciences on the benefits of positive emotion diversity. Biodiversity has been repeatedly shown to foster resistance to disease, pathogens, and invasive species. We extended this metaphor to look at whether emodiversity plays a similarly critical role for the human internal emotional ecosystem. We created an index of emotional diversity, which we refer to as, not kidding, emodiversity, but not that kind of emo. This was adapted from the Shannon Biodiversity Index, which enables us to quantify the richness or specific number of emotions, and the evenness or the extent to which these emotions are experienced in the same proportion. Here, higher values reflect more diverse emotional experiences. Here's a schematic representation of actual prototypical participants. One low in emodiversity, the blues are negative emotions, yellows are positive, and one high. Now, interestingly, both of these participants have identical mean levels of positive in yellow and blue negative emotions, but you can see quite a difference in the shade of blues or yellows in the high emodiversity participant. This is super preliminary data just off the presses, comparing emodiversity in young adults college-aged at high or low risk for mania. And look what we find. These are some interesting kind of preliminary and tantalizing results. What we see is that young adults at high risk for mania, in yellow, show, if you can look at this lower global emotional diversity across positive and negative emotions. But if you really follow this up and see what's driving it, it seems to be that, in fact, high-risk adults are showing lower positive emotional diversity, so showing a lower range of positive emotions, experiencing in our work, as we've seen, more self-focused and reward-driven positive emotions at the extent of other dimensions of positive emotions, perhaps those that are oriented to low arousal, such as contentment, or other oriented, such as compassion. Finally, I just want to touch on some work we're doing right now looking at self-regulation of positive states, looking at emotion-based impulsivity. Now, we know that this is often measured using the positive urgency scale. Example items include, when I'm very happy, I can't seem to stop myself from doing things that have bad consequences, designed to engage the tendency to respond to positive mood states by engaging in risky or harmful behavior. Looking at this across students at UC Berkeley and Central Michigan University, Yale University, and my current institution, UC Boulder, we see that young adults at risk for mania report greater levels of positive urgency, either continuously or when compared categorically in Study 3 to adults at low risk. So I just want to end with some potential next steps and collaborative opportunities. We have a study, we've launched a pilot version this year that we're looking for collaborators for a second wave this fall. So if this interests you, please do contact me, which we call the Emerge Project. This stands for Emerging Milestones in Emotion Regulation, Growth, and Education in first-year college students. And for me, this has been a wonderful synergy as a faculty member between research, teaching, and service identities that many of us have, and a final way to synergize them. The University of Colorado Boulder, as just an example, has approximately 6,500 freshmen matriculating each fall, and with the support of the campus here and other academic advising units, we have broader plans to examine positive emotional processes at college entry using survey, experience sampling, and laboratory-based approaches that may contribute to divergent trajectories of academic and emotional adjustment during the transition to college. We're doing a survey-based approach this fall, and we're looking for other institutions. We have about 12 worldwide to really sample some of these constructs. So again, reach out to me if you're interested, because I believe that we can collaborate together and should on these important and pressing mental health issues. Collaborate together as scientists doing multi-site studies. Again, let's talk if interested. Connect with university administrators to integrate findings into policies aimed at enhancing college well-being. And finally, engaging to disseminate this work in a broader service outreach, supporting policy initiatives and funding mechanisms to prioritize college mental health. After all, we are an interconnected ecosystem. Thank you for listening, and please contact me at june.gruber@colorado.edu or gruberpeplab.com. And thank you too for listening to my toddler and his background noise during this talk.